Have you ever wondered if everything you have been taught about Jesus Christ might be wrong? What if the image we have of him was carefully shaped over the centuries to hide an even deeper truth? Now imagine that one of the most controversial and influential directors in the history of religious cinema, Mel Gibson, has made a revelation so shocking that it threatens to shake the foundations of traditional Christianity. Person responsible for Passion of Christ, one of the most shocking and emotionally intense religious films of all time, it was reportedly said that Jesus Christ is not a person. But how is this possible? This statement challenges everything we know about spirituality and faith. Was Gibson trying to deconstruct the figure of Christ, or was he discovering something that had been hidden for centuries? Before we come to any conclusions, we need to ask an important question. What if the church didn't tell the whole story? Since ancient times, the identity of Jesus has been surrounded by mystery. He himself often spoke mysteriously, for example when he asked his students, "Who do you think I am?" Matthew 16:15. If this answer was so obvious, why did Christ himself insist on provoking speculation about his true identity? Now, Mel Gibson, a man who spent years studying the life of Jesus and has faced harsh criticism for his unfiltered approach to Passion of Christ, seems to have come to a conclusion that few would dare to think about. The question is not simply whether Jesus existed as a man, but if the traditional interpretation of his figure is the only truth. And the most impressive thing, there is evidence that this view has changed deliberately throughout history. Isn't it interesting that the Bible itself warns us about hidden secrets? In Proverbs 25:2 we read, "The glory of God is to hide things, but the glory of kings is to explore them." This means that the truth may be in front of us, but hidden under layers of interpretation. Gibson began digging into ancient texts and discovered that many theologians, philosophers, and spiritual scientists have always questioned the identity of Jesus. According to this view, Christ would not be an isolated person in history, but rather an archetype, divine principle accessible to all. This concept, as strange as it may seem, is not new. Myself, Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of modern psychology, interpreted Jesus as a personification self-luminous, the highest state of human consciousness. But what does this mean? If Jesus is more than a historical figure, what was really taught between the lines of the gospel? If this is true, we will be faced with one of humanity's greatest hidden mysteries. And if Christ is a state of consciousness, a concept beyond our understanding, then the entire structure of religion may be based on a limited interpretation of reality. Now think about this. Who will benefit from hiding this knowledge? Jesus was persecuted in his day precisely because his message threatened the dominant religious system. When he said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," John 8:32, it was not only about spiritual liberation, but also about liberation from dogmas that fetter human understanding. What if Mel Gibson's revelation leads us to a truth that has always been hidden? There are records from ancient manuscripts, forgotten for centuries, that suggest a completely different interpretation of the figure of Christ. Some of these texts point to forbidden knowledge, something that can rewrite everything we think we know about spirituality. Gibson has found something that challenges traditional beliefs and takes us back to a time when Christianity was not yet an institutionalized system. Clues are scattered in long-ignored documents, in currents of thought stifled by history, and even in parallels with the spiritual figures of ancient civilizations. If all this is true, it means that Christ could be much more than we imagine, and that the story told so far may only be a part of what really happened. Truth has the power to liberate, but it can also be uncomfortable. Since the earliest days of Christianity, the identity of Jesus Christ has been the subject of interpretation, debate, and, in many cases, distortion. Jesus himself warned that his message would not be accepted by everyone. "If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you." John 15:18. What is behind this resistance? Why have those who challenge the dominant narrative been persecuted since ancient times? Mel Gibson, as he delved deeper into his study of Christ, began to notice an intriguing pattern. He was not only interested in the religious image of Jesus, but he wanted to understand what was really behind the story that had been taught for centuries. During his research, he discovered something that many choose to ignore. There are ancient documents that show a Christ far beyond the traditional figure we know. In 1945, an archaeological discovery completely changed the views of the early Christians. In a small village in Egypt called Nag Hammadi, a collection of manuscripts has been discovered that reveals something surprising. These texts, known as Gnostic Gospels, describe Jesus in a completely different way than established tradition. Instead of a Messiah who only performs miracles and speaks of salvation, we find a master who teaches awakening the divine consciousness that already exists within every person. No Gospel of Thomas, in one of the writings found in this collection, Jesus says something that challenges everything we have learned. The kingdom of God is within you and all around you. When you know yourself, then you will know and understand that you are the children of the living Father. This teaching places Christ not as a mediator between God and people, but as a mentor, so that every person discover the divine presence within yourself. But why was this knowledge lost? Gibson realized that there had been strong resistance to this view throughout history. The idea that Christ was not just a being separate from humanity, but state of consciousness accessible to everyone, threatened the power of major religious institutions. After all, if people realize that they could have a direct connection with God, what will happen to those who become mediators of this faith? The Bible gives us clues about how certain truths were hidden. Jesus spoke in parables and often did not explain his words openly to everyone. In Matthew 13:10-11, the disciples asked why he taught this way, and Jesus answered, "For it has been given to you to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given." This means your message was levels of understanding, and that not everyone was ready to see the truth behind the words. Mel Gibson began to connect these dots. During production, Passion of Christ unexplained events occurred on set that made him even more question what he knew about Jesus. Actor Jim Caviezel, who played Christ in the film, was struck by lightning while recording one of the scenes. Moreover, he reported that he felt intense pain, as if he were somehow experiencing the real suffering of Jesus. Was this a coincidence or a sign that there was something much deeper to the story? Gibson realized that the events around him might reveal something. If Jesus was not just a man, but rather a manifestation of sacred and universal knowledge, then his story was not just about a man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, but about spiritual reality as available to all who seek the truth. If we look at human history, we see that this is not an isolated idea. Many ancient spiritual traditions spoke of a divine principle present in every person. The Essenes, a Jewish group living during the time of Jesus, believed that the true doctrine of the faith was awaken the inner light. The first Gnostic Christians said that Christ was not just a man, but rather a reflection of humanity's own spiritual path. And this brings us to one of the biggest mysteries. Perhaps the figure of Christ was created in order to hide his true essence. If Jesus came to teach that the kingdom of God is within each of us, as he himself said, then why has institutionalized religion focused so much on presenting it as a distant entity, whose salvation depends on intermediaries? The answer to this question may lie in the decisions that were made in the first centuries of Christianity. When Emperor Constantine officially established the Christian faith in the Roman Empire, many ancient writings were deleted, discarded, or rewritten, build a unified narrative. The idea of a Christ available to all threatened the power structure of the time. If all of this is true, it means that Jesus' message may have been reduced to a limited version of what it really was. What Mel Gibson discovered during his research journey leads us to an even deeper question. Why has this truth never been widely discussed? The answer can completely change our understanding of Christ, his mission, and the influence he continues to have today. If we can learn anything from Mel Gibson's journey, it is that the truth, when revealed, requires courage to face it. The idea that Jesus Christ may be more than man, a divine principle available to all, does not diminish its importance, but rather expands it to a level that few have dared to explore. From the earliest days of Christianity, the message of Christ was shaped to fit within structures that provided control and order. But was this Jesus' real purpose? He himself challenged the traditions of the time, stood up to religious leaders, and taught that true connection with God is not found in temples or institutions, but in the heart of every person. In Luke 17:21, he said clearly, "The kingdom of God is within you." If this is the true message, why was it transformed into something so distant? Looking at history, we see that there has always been resistance to those who sought to break with established structures. A reflection of this was Christ's own crucifixion. He was not condemned for miracles, but rather for challenging the religious system and offering people a direct path to God. As Mel Gibson explored this issue more deeply, he realized that the true teaching of Jesus lies not only in his death and resurrection, but also in the inner transformation that he invites us to experience. The crucifixion can symbolize the death of the ego, false beliefs and fears that imprison us. And the resurrection represents the rebirth of consciousness, the discovery of who we truly are in God. This explains why the early Gnostic Christians spoke of Christ as state of consciousness, a spiritual awakening that can be achieved by those who seek the truth. This vision does not contradict the Christian faith, but deepens it. After all, Jesus didn't come just to be admired from a distance. He came to change lives and show a path that anyone can follow. But this is a big question. How many are really ready to take this path? Many people spend their lives waiting for something external to change them, when in fact change occurs within each person. Christ called us to be not just spectators of faith, but active participants putting his teaching into practice. This means going beyond what we have been taught superficially and seeking a real connection with God, not being afraid to question, learn, and grow. Perhaps this is why so many truths about Jesus were kept secret. A people who awaken their spiritual power, who understand that God dwells in each of them, these are people who cannot be controlled. And now the question remains, what will you do with this knowledge? The truth is before us, but each person decides for himself whether he wants to see it. Like Jesus' disciples, we have the choice to stay on the surface or dive deeper. Continue to pursue convictions without question, or pursue greater understanding that can change our lives and our relationship with God. If this topic touched you, if it made you think about something you had never thought about before, share your opinion in the comments. Have you ever had any doubts about the way Christ has been presented throughout history? Do you believe there is something that has been hidden from the public? Or do you feel that this vision further strengthens your faith? I really want to know what you think. Write in the comments, even if anonymously. Your participation is essential to our ability to expand this conversation. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to continue receiving content that challenges and deepens your vision of faith and spirituality. And of course, if this video had any impact on you, leave a like. This helps us reach more people and spread this message. The search for truth is a journey that never ends, and I am grateful that you are here, walking this path with me. See you in the next video.